So it is allowed. Um, no one's going to react in horror that you snapped and yelled at your kids. It is completely accepted and almost a societal norm, if not the norm, to snap and get mad at your children. And it made me realize that this is literally our outlet as parents, as adults, to release the pent up frustration that we're experiencing in our bodies. We are allowed to release that onto our children. We are allowed to dump that onto our children. And so we do that. We do that all the time. That the human experience will have all of these external factors that cause our nervous system to trigger.
Hi, my name is Becky Jennings, and this is the Responsible Parenting Podcast. I give you the transformational tools to stop reacting to your children in the moment and start responding with intention.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Responsible Parenting Podcast. This is Becky Jennings, and I'm coming at you with a very sultry voice from day 15 of whatever cold my kids gave me this week. So I apologize for the voice. I had hoped it would be better before recording, but it is not getting any better, and I'm running out of time. So here we are, and I am showing up in this imperfection and in this new sound. So bear with me. Hopefully, I won't be squeaking and coughing, but here we are. So I wanted to talk to you about something that really hit me and kind of blindsided the way that I am parenting now, because it was such a profound realization that it has really shifted the way I view my responses and I view my reactions to my children. So I don't even really know the dynamic that this epiphany hit me, but it was kind of a similar thing you hear almost every day of a parent in deep frustration that they're venting to another parent that they just lost it on their kid, or I had tried 6 or 7 times to say it really nice, and then I just ended up losing it. And the other parent echoes back, "Oh, I know, I have been there. It is just awful," or "I did the same thing," and it's just this accepted, societally accepted outlet for us to dump all of our frustration onto our kids. So it is allowed. No one's going to react in horror that you snapped and yelled at your kids. It is completely accepted and almost a societal norm, if not the norm, to snap and get mad at your children. And it made me realize that this is literally our outlet as parents, as adults, to release the pent up frustration that we're experiencing in our bodies. We are allowed to release that onto our children. We are allowed to dump that onto our children. And so we do that. We do that all the time. That the human experience will have all of these external factors that cause our nervous system to trigger, whether it's work frustrations, a spouse fighting with your spouse or partner, a tricky friend dynamic, lack of your needs being met, hungry, tired, you're not able to access alone time, your needs are, or your to do list isn't getting done. All of those add to nervous system dysregulation. And we are not recognizing as a society as a whole regularly and consistently that those factors add up to our own dysregulation. And then we are dumping all of our shit, all of our dysregulation, all of our anger and frustration onto our children because it's easy, because they trigger us most often, and because it's acceptable. So I wanted to talk about a shift in my mindset, and I wanted to talk about why it's easier to dump all of our shit onto our children versus take responsibility to shift what's happening internally so that we can respond more appropriately to our children. So, Of course, it's easier, right? It's so much easier to be reactive than to be responsible. And here's a big list of why it's easier. And then I want you to think about what steps we can be taking to make those micro shifts or huge macro shifts in your life so that you can show up with more awareness, more presence, and more compassion to their experience, so that we can break this cycle of this accepted norm of our kids being our dumping ground for our dysregulation and our frustration. My therapist always talks about how no matter what we do, no matter how conscious we are, no matter how thoughtful we are, some of our pile of shit will end up on our children's pile of shit. It's just human nature because we're connected and attached and we're deeply feeling people. So, how can we minimize that? And how can we proactively fix what's happening inside of ourselves so that we can show up much better? I'm going to try to be as concise as possible because I can tell my voice is going. So I want to get through this and then open this up for a much bigger discussion. So, what does the work look like as an adult, to get in touch with how we can start to heal this in our own bodies? So it starts with first just understanding what it feels like to be in our bodies. So many of us are so disconnected and disassociated from our bodies that we actually don't even notice the cues that our nervous system is sending us. So it's really vital to get back in touch with those sensations and feelings so that we can learn to recognize them and build like protection measures for ourselves. So that's learning what our triggers are. That's learning the nervous system cues that our body is sending us. Learning the sensations that we feel in our bodies when we're coming up against stress, when we're hitting our emotional edge. Where are we feeling that in our bodies? What is causing us to feel that? When? What times of day do we feel most stressed? Or what time of day do we feel that we have the most capacity to parent, right? Let's start to look at those things and then we can address the root of the problem. This is probably the hardest part, addressing the root of our issues. A lot of those can be extremely traumatic, and oftentimes we're unwilling to go back there. We're unwilling to feel all of those feelings again because we have neatly compartmentalized those feelings and we have put them on a shelf and we are never to touch them again. But if those are the source of our patterns, our cycles, our belief systems of self, and then from those patterns, cycles, and beliefs, we're parenting in a not positive way, or we're dumping a lot of those feelings onto our children, then it is important that we address them for the safety and health and well being of our children's emotions and their belief systems. So that's a huge part. And I think even just those first two, understanding our body and addressing these belief systems and patterns, is so big that it keeps people from starting this process. And so again, we just continue to unload and unleash on our children, and they become our emotional dumping ground for our anger and frustration. So that it starts the healing process, right? Getting resourced, learning how you can safely discharge these feelings. That could be therapy. That could be, meditation, gratitude work, journaling, finding support systems, finding a way to resource yourself so that you can start that healing journey. Then putting it into practice, right? This is like, we can do amazing work in a non-stressed. We can be amazing parents in low stress weeks, you know? But when we're at our max and we're hitting our threshold and we are tapped emotionally, physically, how can we show up in practice? Those are the times when, like they say, the rubber meets the road, right? So how can we pretend to be scientists, right? And test theories. I talk to my son all the time about being a scientist and testing a theory, right? So maybe he's whining or asking for something, and he's been asking the same way over and over and over again. And he wants to be a scientist and an engineer, and that's what he says at 6. So who knows? But I play into that with him, and I say, oh, buddy, what do scientists do? What do scientists do? And he said, they test, they do experiments. Yeah, they do experiments. They test a theory, right? They test to see if their idea will work. And if it doesn't work, then it's that failed experiment. And they're not failures, but that didn't work. That was a failed experiment. So then they try again, right? They try again with a new idea and a new method. So, how can you put into practice as a parent and act as a scientist and see what works and see what has been a failed experiment in terms of connection and collaboration? And then, it really takes that accountability and the humility as a person to show up and take accountability for when you mess up. And I think this is really hard for parents, but so vital and so incredible if you can start to implement this. Because if we refuse to take accountability for when we mess up as a parent, we're telling our kids that our hierarchy, or us being over them as parents, that they don't deserve it because we're the parent, we're bigger, we're better, that they don't deserve our apology. They don't deserve to have that corrected. That they deserve to get all of our shit on them because their behavior was bad. Because they did something wrong. First, it's acknowledging that they're people in their own bodies. They're brand new people in bodies. They're making sense of themselves. They're making sense of themselves in the world, and they're making sense of the world. So it's hard enough for them to figure out their place, their understanding of their nervous system and their cues, understanding the processes and order of life. So that's hard enough. And then when we decide that they're not worthy of an apology, that their behavior dictates our love, our connection, that it's not unconditional, that it is conditional based off how they show up for us. If that's how they're growing up, then we're not ever going to change this cycle. They're going to grow up with a belief system that supports the narrative that they're not worthy, that they don't deserve, you know, to be treated as a human, a basic human with fundamental rights of connection, safety, attachment, of understanding the sensations in their own body. So I can wrap this up really fast because I'm starting to really lose my voice now, but it hit me and it struck me, and I thought it could be interesting to have a deeper conversation of this. But when do we stop? When do we stop and acknowledge that we're yelling at our kids because of all of our stuff, all of our triggers, all of our daily frustrations, our needs not being met? So, when do we decide as parents and as a society that we're going to take ownership of our stuff before ever putting it on our children? And what could that look like as a society? Accountability, accountability, humility, responsibility. As parents, as caregivers, as the big person helping mold our little people's lives. I would really love to have a further discussion about that. I don't know if that touches you or hits you in a different way, but when I realized that I was putting all of my stuff onto my children because it was completely acceptable, because it's the norm, because no one is ever going to tell you, "Ooh, you just put a lot of your stuff on your child." No, they're going to acknowledge, "Oh, I do that too. Oh, it's so frustrating." Right? But when do we start to prioritize healing ourselves, focusing on us and all of our stuff before putting it on our children, before reacting to our children, so that we can respond and help nourish them and nurture them and help them be sound in their own bodies? And as always, thank you for joining me today in the Responsible Parenting Podcast. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Responsible Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share the episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough. You are capable. You've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together.